Howard's voice echoed down the hallway as I walked past the conference room. Innovation comes from fresh perspectives, he was saying, that booming tone he used when he wanted everyone to know he was making important decisions. I didn't slow down. I'd heard this speech before. My name's Wade Hartwell, I'm 49, and I've been the Strategic Operations Director at Sterling Manufacturing for the past 3 years. What Howard didn't mention in his little presentation was that I'd spent those 3 years building the logistics backbone that kept his family company running. Not that anyone was keeping score. Well, actually, I was keeping score. That's what engineers do. See, Howard Sterling might own the company, but I owned the systems. Every vendor relationship, every supply chain optimization, every throughput improvement that turned Sterling Manufacturing from a struggling mid-size operation into something that actually made money that came from my shop. I had the mechanical engineering degree, the MBA, and 15 years of logistics experience to back it up. But here's the thing about family businesses. Blood beats brains every time. I built the vendor matrix from scratch. Negotiated exclusive contracts with suppliers who wouldn't even return Howard's calls 5 years ago. Designed redundant supply chains that could handle disruptions without missing a beat. My department ran 22% under budget while increasing throughput by 31%. The numbers don't lie, even when people do. You want to know what recognition looked like. An email from Howard saying good work on the Q3 numbers. Not even my name in it. Just forwarded to the whole management team like I was some anonymous cog in his machine. Meanwhile, my wife Sarah, who happens to be Howard's daughter, kept telling me to be patient. Dad appreciates what you do, she'd say over dinner while our kids Riley and Jordan argued about soccer practice schedules. He just doesn't show it, right? He showed it. All right? Just not the way Sarah thought. The thing about mechanical systems is they're predictable. You can calculate load capacity, failure points, stress tolerances. People are messier. But after 3 years of watching Howard operate, I'd figured out his patterns too. That's why I started documenting everything. Not just the usual project files and progress reports. I mean everything. Email threads, contract clauses, vendor agreements, system dependencies. I created what I called my operational insurance policy. Every critical piece of infrastructure that kept Sterling Manufacturing running, cataloged, and cross-referenced. Call it paranoid if you want. I call it good engineering practice. The storm started brewing the week Howard came back from his golf trip with his old college buddy Mitch. Sarah mentioned it over breakfast, something about Mitch's nephew needing an internship for his senior year. Business major from state, apparently. Eager to learn. I clicked my pen twice. Bad sign. I only do that when the system's about to encounter an unknown variable. Just an internship. I asked, spreading jam on Jordan's toast while he wrestled with his backpack. Dad said something about giving young people opportunities, Sarah replied, not looking up from her coffee, fresh energy, new ideas, that sort of thing. Click, click. Fresh energy. In my experience, that was code for cheap labor with no real understanding of how things actually work. But I kept that observation to myself. 2 weeks later, Bryce Coleman showed up, 22 years old, firm handshake, dress shirt, so new it still had crease lines. Howard personally walked him around the office, introducing him to everyone like he was the heir apparent. I'd been there 3 years and still parked in the back lot. Bryce's desk was positioned right in the sight line of Howard's office. Dual monitors, ergonomic chair, view of the parking lot. My setup was a refurbished laptop in whatever corner of the conference room wasn't being used for actual meetings. Wade, Howard called out as they passed my workstation. Meet Bryce. He's going to be observing operations for the next few months. Show him the ropes, will you? I stood up, extended my hand. Bryce's grip was firm, but his palm was sweating. Nervous energy. Classic symptoms of someone who'd been told this was a big opportunity, but had no idea what he was walking into. Welcome aboard, I said. What's your background? Business administration, Bryce replied with that college-confident smile. Specialization in strategic management and organizational leadership. I clicked my pen once. Any hands-on experience with supply chain logistics? His smile flickered. Well, I've studied the theoretical frameworks. Case studies, optimization models, that sort of thing. Ah, theory. I nodded. That'll come in handy. On his third day, Bryce walked over to my workstation while I was reviewing throughput reports from the previous quarter. The numbers were solid. We'd maintained consistent flow rates despite a 15% increase in order volume, and our error rate was down to 0.3%. Hey, Wade, he said, pulling up a chair. Howard mentioned you could bring me up to speed on the vendor protocols. Maybe show me how to access the Apex logistics portal. I looked at him for a long moment, my pen clicking in a steady rhythm. The Apex relationship was the crown jewel of our supplier network. They handled 40% of our inbound components, and their integration with our inventory management system was so tight that a single configuration error could cascade through the entire production schedule. Sure thing, I said. But fair warning, the Apex relationship is more complex than it looks. A lot of moving parts in that integration. I pulled up the contract on my laptop, scrolled to section 7.3. See this clause here? Exclusive liaison designation. All technical implementations have to go through a single authorized contact. Bryce leaned forward, squinting at the screen, and that's me. Has been since I negotiated the deal 18 months ago. What I didn't tell him was that I'd specifically insisted on that clause. Apex's VP of Operations, Carmen, was old school. She liked dealing with one person who knew the systems inside and out. Multiple contacts meant miscommunication, and miscommunication meant downtime. So how do I get access? I click my pen twice. You'd need Apex to agree to modify the contract terms, which requires 30-day notice and approval from their legal department. His face went through several expressions. 30 days, maybe longer, depends on their review process. I turned back to my laptop, might want to check with Howard about that timeline. What Bryce didn't understand, what Howard didn't understand for that matter, was that these vendor relationships weren't just business transactions. They were carefully calibrated partnerships built on trust, consistency, and proven performance. You don't just swap out the interface and expect everything to keep running smoothly, but I figured they'd learn that soon enough. That night, I sat in my home office with a beer and my laptop, reviewing every contract, every vendor agreement, every system dependency that kept Sterling Manufacturing operational. Sarah knocked on the door around 10 p.m. "You're working late again," she said, leaning against the doorframe. The hallway light behind her made her look tired. Just reviewing some documentation, she stepped into the office, arms crossed. Dad mentioned Bryce is having trouble accessing some of the vendor systems. I took a sip of beer, clicked my pen twice. Learning curve. These systems aren't as straightforward as the textbooks make them seem. Wade. Her voice had that edge. It got when she thought I was being deliberately difficult. You could help him out a little more. I looked at my wife, Howard's daughter, mother of my kids, the woman who'd been caught in the middle of this corporate family drama for 3 years. I'm helping him. I explained the contract requirements. That's more than most people would do. You know what I mean? Actually, I did. She wanted me to make it easy for Bryce, to smooth over the complications, to pretend that 18 months of relationship building and system integration could be transferred over a coffee break. But that's not how engineering works. Sarah, these vendor relationships took years to build. The Apex contract alone required 6 months of negotiations. You don't just hand that over to someone because they're eager to learn. She sat down in the chair across from my desk. Dad thinks Bryce has potential. I'm sure he does. What's that supposed to mean? I saved my work and closed the laptop. It means Howard sees what he wants to see. Fresh energy, new ideas, untapped potential. What he doesn't see is the difference between potential and proven performance. The announcement came 3 weeks later. All hands meeting with catered bagels, Howard's way of softening whatever blow he was about to deliver. The last time we'd seen pastries in the conference room, half the quality assurance team got restructured into other departments. We filed in department heads and project managers, and yes, interns, plural, because apparently fresh blood was the new corporate strategy. I took my usual spot halfway down the table on the left side. Good sight lines, minimal exposure, strategic positioning learned from 15 years of corporate survival. Howard entered like he was walking onto a game show, Bryce trailing behind him with a laptop clutched against his chest like body armor. The kid's left leg was bouncing so fast I could feel the vibration through the table. Team, Howard began, arms spread wide like he was blessing us all. As you know, we're entering an exciting phase of growth and innovation. I clicked my pen once, twice. The presentation slide popped up behind him. Project Elevate, Strategic Future Integration, Comic Sans font, Jesus. We've been analyzing market trends and operational inefficiencies. Howard continued, completely ignoring the 6-month efficiency analysis I delivered last quarter. The one that identified $2.3 million in potential savings and outlined a 3-phase implementation strategy. And we've realized we need fresh thinking to tackle our next major initiative. Here it comes, I thought. That's why I'm excited to announce that Bryce will be leading Project Elevate as our Strategic Innovation Coordinator. Silence, the kind that makes your ears ring. Project Elevate was my baby. I'd been developing the logistics automation framework for 8 months. Had prototypes ready, vendor specifications mapped out, implementation timeline drafted down to the week. Hell, I'd even stress tested the system architecture to handle 200% capacity increases. I smiled and clapped. 3 quiet, measured claps. The sound echoed in the vacuum of everyone else's confusion. Howard beamed. Bryce stood up awkwardly, cleared his throat, and mumbled something about being honored to contribute fresh energy to the team's dynamic synergies and leveraging cross-functional collaboration to optimize stakeholder value propositions. I wrote that down, word for word. Figured I might need a laugh later. Wade will be supporting the transition, Howard added, finally acknowledging my existence, making sure Bryce has everything he needs to hit the ground running. After the meeting, people kept walking past my desk, looking confused. A few stopped to ask if the rumors were true. I just smiled and said management had made their decision. Bryce found me 2 hours later, holding a printed copy of the Apex Logistics Master Agreement, the one I'd negotiated personally, clause by carefully worded clause. "Hey Wade," he said, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "I'm trying to understand this exclusivity provision in Section 7.3. Something about authorized liaison protocols. I can't seem to get access to their system portal." I looked up from my laptop, pen clicking in a steady 2-beat rhythm. "That's because you're not the authorized liaison, but I thought the contract specifies that all technical integrations go through a designated point of contact." "That's me" has been for 18 months. His face went through several expressions. Confusion, then understanding, then something that might have been panic. "So how do I?" "You don't, not unless Apex Logistics agrees to modify the contract terms, which requires 30-day notice and approval from their legal department." I paused. Assuming they're willing to discuss it at all, I turned back to my laptop, might want to check with Howard about that timeline. What I didn't tell him was that Carmen, Apex's VP of Operations, had specifically requested the exclusive liaison clause after a previous supplier relationship went sideways due to multiple contact points. "Too many cooks in the kitchen," she'd said. "We need one person who understands both our systems and yours." That person was me. And Carmen wasn't the type to change established procedures just because someone new wanted to play. Bryce walked away, shoulders slumped. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The weekend came and went. Monday morning, I found a voicemail from Carmen waiting for me. Wade got a call Friday from some kid claiming to be the new liaison for Project Elevate, told him he needs to go through proper channels. "What's the story over there?" I called her back immediately. "Small internal reorganization," I said. "Nothing that affects our operational protocols." "Good." "You know how I feel about changes to established procedures." "I do. This kid seemed nice enough, but he kept asking about fast-tracking authorization processes. Made me nervous." Carmen had good reason to be nervous. The last time someone had tried to fast-track changes to the Apex integration, it had resulted in a 3-day production shutdown and $800,000 in lost revenue. "I'll handle it," I told her. "I know you will. That's why we like working with you." After I hung up, I sat back in my chair and looked at the framed photo on my desk. Riley and Jordan at last year's soccer tournament, both holding trophies, Sarah between them with that smile she gets when everything's going right. I clicked my pen twice and opened a new document on my laptop. Time to document everything. I spent the next week building what I privately called my contingency database. Every vendor contract, every system dependency, every critical pathway that kept Sterling Manufacturing's operations flowing. Not just the obvious stuff, the deeper infrastructure that most people never think about until it stops working. Take our inventory management system. On the surface, it looks simple enough. Parts come in, parts go out, production schedules get updated. But underneath that simplicity was a web of interconnected protocols that I'd spent 2 years perfecting. Barcode scanning linked to quality control databases. Automated reorder points tied to production forecasts. Exception handling routines that could reroute shipments when suppliers had delays. Bryce wouldn't see any of that. He'd see the user interface and think he understood the system. Tuesday morning, I got another call from Carmen at Apex. This time she sounded frustrated. "Wade, I need to ask you something directly. Is Sterling Manufacturing planning to change our liaison arrangement?" "Not that I'm aware of." "Why?" "Because I've now had 3 calls from this Bryce kid, each time claiming he's been authorized to handle our account. Yesterday he asked if we could streamline our authentication protocols to give him direct access." I clicked my pen twice. "What did you tell him?" "Same thing I told him the first 2 times. All changes to our security protocols require written authorization from the designated liaison." "That's you." And his response, Carmen sighed, he asked if there was someone higher up he could speak to, someone with decision-making authority. That was a red flag. Bryce was trying to end-run the established chain of command, probably because Howard had told him to take initiative or show leadership. What he didn't understand was that vendors like Apex built their entire operation around predictable, documented procedures. Start changing those procedures without proper authorization, and you're asking for trouble. I'll handle this, I told Carmen. I hope so. Because if Sterling Manufacturing can't maintain consistent communication protocols, we're going to have to reassess the relationship. After I hung up, I walked over to Bryce's desk. He was hunched over his laptop, typing furiously, probably working on a PowerPoint presentation about synergistic optimization paradigms. Bryce, can I see you in conference room B for a few minutes? He looked up, startled. Oh, hey, Wade. Sure, let me just now would be good. I waited while he gathered his laptop and notepad, then led him to the small conference room at the end of the hall. The one without windows where conversations stayed private. I understand you've been calling Apex Logistics directly, I said once we were seated. His face flushed. Howard said I should take initiative, show leadership, and what exactly did you tell them? Just that I'm the new project lead and I need access to their systems to implement the Elevate framework. I clicked my pen 3 times, fast clicks. Danger zone. Bryce, do you understand what happens when a vendor loses confidence in their client's ability to maintain consistent communication? I was just trying to. They terminate the contract, usually with 30 days notice, sometimes less if they determine there's been a material breach of established protocols. The color drained from his face. I didn't know Apex Logistics handles 40% of our inbound components. If they walk away, we have maybe 2 weeks of inventory before production stops completely. After that, we're looking at 8 to 12 weeks to establish replacement vendor relationships, assuming we can find suppliers willing to match their pricing and delivery schedules. I let that sink in for a moment. The cost of a complete production shutdown would be approximately $1 in the first month alone, not counting the revenue loss from delayed customer deliveries or the potential penalties for breach of our own contracts. Bryce was staring at his laptop screen like it might offer some escape route from the conversation. So here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to call Carmen at Apex and tell her there's been a miscommunication. You're going to explain that all technical coordination will continue to go through the established channels until further notice. And you're going to apologize for any confusion. But Howard said Howard doesn't understand vendor relationship management. That's why he hired me. I stood up, smoothed my shirt, make the call today. Carmen's direct number is in the vendor contact database. Walking back to my desk, I could feel the familiar tension building in my shoulders, the kind that comes from watching someone stumble toward a cliff while everyone around them cheers their bold approach to landscape navigation. That afternoon, Howard called me into his office. He was sitting behind his mahogany desk, hands folded, wearing the expression he reserved for difficult conversations. Wade, I understand there was some confusion about the Apex account today. No confusion on my end. Bryce says you told him to back off from vendor coordination. I clicked my pen twice, looked Howard straight in the eye. I told him to follow established protocols. Carmen specifically requested that all technical coordination continue through the designated liaison. That's not my rule, it's theirs. But we need to transition these relationships eventually. Eventually, sure, but you don't do it by having an inexperienced intern call the vendor's VP and ask her to change 18 months of established security procedures. Howard's jaw tightened. Bryce isn't just an intern. He's the project lead. He's a 22-year-old business student with no practical experience in logistics operations. Putting a title on him doesn't change that. Everyone starts somewhere, Wade. They start by learning the systems, understanding the relationships, earning the trust of the people they're supposed to work with. They don't start by trying to redesign processes they've never seen in operation. Howard leaned back in his chair. Are you going to be a problem with this transition? I met his gaze, kept my voice level. I'm going to make sure Sterling Manufacturing's vendor relationships remain stable and productive. If that's a problem, we should probably discuss it. He waved his hand dismissively. Just work with Bryce. Okay, show him the ropes. Help him succeed. I'll teach him everything he needs to know, assuming he's willing to learn. Walking out of Howard's office, I had the distinct feeling that I'd just been put on notice. Not in so many words, but the subtext was clear. Play ball with the family's chosen successor, or find yourself on the outside. That evening, I sat in my home office, updating my contingency database. Sarah found me there around 9 p.m., glass of wine in her hand, concern on her face. How bad is it? She asked. Depends on how you define bad. Dad said you and Bryce had some kind of confrontation today. I saved my work, turned to face her. Your nephew nearly cost us our most important vendor relationship. I explained why that would be a problem. Howard called it a confrontation. Sarah sat down across from me. Wade, I know this is frustrating, but Bryce is family. So am I. You know what I mean? I did know. Blood family versus marriage family. The difference between being born into the Sterling legacy and being grafted onto it. The difference between potential and performance, between promise and proven results. Sarah, I've given this company 3 years of my life. Built relationships, designed systems, delivered results. Your father just handed my biggest project to someone who doesn't understand the difference between a purchase order and a production schedule. He's trying to prepare the next generation. He's trying to justify keeping it in the family. We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, Jordan was shooting baskets in the driveway, the rhythmic bounce of the ball against the backboard marking time. "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked finally. I clicked my pen twice, looked at the screen full of documentation I'd been compiling. I'm going to make sure everyone understands exactly what they're dealing with. The next morning, I printed out a single sheet of paper. Clean, professional, no drama. Howard Sterling, CEO Sterling Manufacturing Corp. Dear Howard, please accept this letter as formal notice of my resignation from my position as Strategic Operations Director, effective 2 weeks from today's date. I will ensure a complete transition of all current projects and operational responsibilities. Sincerely, Wade Hartwell. I walked into Howard's office without knocking. He was on the phone, gesturing at spreadsheets spread across his desk like they might magically reorganize themselves if he waved hard enough. "Hang on," he said into the phone, then looked up at me. "Wade, perfect timing. We need to discuss accelerating the Bryce handover. Some of these vendor protocols are proving more complex than anticipated." I placed the letter on his desk, directly on top of the spreadsheets. He stared at it for a moment, then opened it. I watched his face cycle through the familiar progression: confusion, understanding, panic. "You're joking, right?" "No." He dropped the phone without hanging up. I could hear someone on the other end asking Howard, "Howard, are you there? Wade? Come on, let's be adults here. You're taking this project assignment personally." I clicked my pen twice, kept my voice level and professional. "You made your decision about who should lead Project Elevate. I'm making my decision about where I want to work. This is ridiculous. Over one project? You're acting like Howard." I kept my tone even, no heat in it. "You wanted fresh perspectives and innovative thinking. You got them. I'm sure Bryce will figure everything out." I turned to leave, paused at the door without looking back. "Oh, and you'll want to loop legal in on the vendor transitions. Some of those contracts have specific clauses about operational continuity and authorized liaisons. Might take some time to sort through the documentation." I was back at my desk for exactly 20 minutes before my phone started buzzing. Text from Sarah. "Dad says you quit?" Reply. "Pursuing new opportunities." Text. "What new opportunities?" Reply. "Independent consulting. Starting Monday, I'd registered Hartwell Operational Solutions LLC the previous week. Just good planning." By lunch, word had spread through the office like smoke through ventilation ducts. People kept walking past my desk with confused expressions. A few stopped to ask if the rumors were true. I smiled and confirmed that I was exploring new directions. Bryce tried to access the Apex portal again that afternoon. Same error message. He approached my desk with the careful steps of someone walking across thin ice. "Wade, I really need to get into that system. Howard says the entire Project Elevate timeline depends on it. I understand. Can you help me out, just temporarily?" I studied him for a long moment. The kid was drowning, and he knew it. Not really his fault that Howard had pushed him into water too deep to stand in. "Bryce, remember our conversation about vendor relationships and consistent communication protocols?" He nodded. "Carmen, at Apex, specifically designed their security system to prevent unauthorized access. That's not bureaucracy, it's risk management. One misconfigured setting in their portal could corrupt 3 months of inventory data." His face went pale again. "But here's the good news," I continued. "Howard's got 2 weeks to work out the transition details. I'm sure he'll find a solution." The call came the following Friday. Not to me, I wasn't there anymore. But Sarah told me about it over dinner while Riley and Jordan debated whether soccer practice should count as homework time. "Dad's in full panic mode," she said, cutting Jordan's chicken into smaller pieces. "Apex Logistics has suspended all shipments pending clarification of authorized liaison status." I reached across the table to wipe spilled juice before it could spread. "Standard procedure when there's uncertainty about communication protocols. And Titan Industries wants an emergency meeting about operational continuity concerns. They're Sterling's biggest client. Smart of them to ask questions, Wade." Sarah's voice carried that edge again. "This isn't just about you anymore. Other people's jobs are at stake." I looked at my wife, then at my kids arguing over dessert privileges. "I documented everything, Sarah. Every process, every contact, every system dependency. It's all in the transition files I left on the server. Dad says Bryce can't make sense of half of it. That's a training issue, not a documentation issue. So fix it." I clicked my pen twice. I don't work there anymore. Monday morning brought the first consulting inquiry, a former Sterling client who'd heard about my availability through industry channels. Tuesday brought 2 more. By Thursday, I had enough potential work to keep me busy for 6 months. Friday afternoon, my phone rang. Howard's name on the display. I let it go to voicemail. His voice, tight and controlled. Wade, we need to discuss the current vendor situation. There have been some complications. Call me back. I deleted the message. He called again Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The following Tuesday, I picked up. Wade, thank God. Look, this vendor coordination issue is spiraling. Apex won't process anything without proper authorization. Titan Industries is threatening to pull their Q4 contracts. We need your expertise back. I'm fully committed to my consulting clients. A pause. What kind of arrangement are we talking about? I opened my laptop, pulled up the document I'd prepared earlier. Consulting rate is $350 per hour. Minimum 6-month retainer paid in advance. Vendor relationship management, system architecture consulting, operational continuity planning. Silence stretched across the connection. Wade, that's significantly more than your previous salary. Market rate for specialized logistics consulting. You're welcome to shop around for alternatives. Another pause, longer this time. How quickly can you start? I'll have the contract ready by end of business today. The wire transfer arrived Monday morning. Full 6-month retainer plus a 25% premium for emergency operational support services. I printed the payment confirmation and hung it on the wall above my home office desk, right next to my engineering degree and the photo of Riley scoring her first goal. Sarah found me there Tuesday evening, reviewing the same vendor contracts I'd built from scratch 3 years earlier. You're going back. I'm providing specialized consulting services to multiple clients. Sterling Manufacturing is one of them. She sat down across from me, wine glass in hand. Dad called you a stubborn son of a bitch. I've been called worse by better people. He also said you were right about the complexity of those vendor relationships. I clicked my pen twice. Saved my work. Complex systems require qualified operators. And the other thing, what other thing about recognizing talent when he sees it? I closed my laptop and looked out the window. Jordan was practicing free throws in the driveway, the steady rhythm of the basketball against the backboard marking time like a metronome. Recognition's nice, I said. Respect is better. Fair compensation is best. 3 months later, Bryce moved to the marketing department. Howard called it a strategic reassignment to better utilize his communication skills. Project Elevate got shelved pending comprehensive operational review. I kept the consulting contract. Turns out there's significant demand for someone who understands both the technical complexities of logistics and the human complexities of family businesses. The best part, every time I walk into Sterling Manufacturing for a site visit, people actually use my name. Funny how billing $350 an hour changes the conversation dynamics. Howard still calls me Wade though, but the tone is different now, respectful. Like he's finally figured out that the quiet guy in the corner wasn't just filling a seat. He was holding the whole operation together. Sometimes the best recognition is the kind you have to engineer yourself. If you're sitting in your cubicle right now watching someone else get credit for your work, watching family connections trump professional competence, watching your expertise get dismissed by people who couldn't run your department for a week without calling you for help, remember this: your value isn't determined by other people's ability to see it. Document everything. Build your leverage. Know your worth. And when the time comes, don't be afraid to make them prove they can succeed without you. Because sometimes the only way to get respect is to stop accepting anything less. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever been the essential person everyone takes for granted. Trust me, you're not alone.